Welcome back to Amazing Earth Level 1, which is on slow land changes. This mission will be on weathering. Before we get started, let's review our big question for this quest, and that is, how do Earth's resources change? Our key point is Earth's surface is constantly changing. These changes occur either slowly through weathering, erosion, and deposition, or rapidly because of natural disasters like earthquakes and volcanoes. Humans can also change Earth's surface both positively or negatively. By studying Earth's changes and natural resources like minerals, rocks, and soil, humans can determine how to use natural resources to survive and where to build structures used for living. Mission 3 is going to be on weathering. Our mission objective is to compare and contrast, so what's the same and what's different between physical and chemical weathering. The questions that we need to focus on this mission is first to identify what is weathering, what are the two different types of weathering called, and the hint is that's in the mission objective. What are the agents or causes of physical weathering? What are the agents or causes of chemical weathering? Before we get started, I'm going to play this brief video to help you visualize kind of some of the things that we'll talk about throughout this mission.
Weathering.
This rock is smaller, but it looks like the same type of rock as this mountain.
Weathering happens over time. It's a process. Weathering can break large rocks into small rocks. Weathering breaks smaller rocks down further into soil, sand, or even tiny particles called sediment. But what causes weathering? Water, ice, wind, plants, heating and cooling. All of these things affect the Earth and play a part in breaking rocks down into smaller pieces. They are the causes or agents of weathering. Water. Some of these agents can cause change physically. That is, just by the force of contacting the rock. Water, in all its forms, is the most powerful agent. The physical force of water and ice can break rocks and wear away their surfaces. When water freezes in cracks in rocks, it expands. It gets bigger. The force of expanding water is so great it can actually split rock apart. You might have discovered this yourself if you've ever frozen a water bottle to take to school. That bottle is full of water, all the way to the top. It's standing nicely in the freezer. You think, I can put it on my desk tomorrow and let it melt. I'll have cold water all day long. The next morning, though, what's happened? The bottle won't stand up. The frozen water has gotten bigger. It has expanded and pushed out the bottom of the bottle. It's no longer flat. The freezing action of water can expand the cracks in rocks and break them up. The flowing action of water can weather rock too. It slowly wears the surface of rocks away. This stream bottom has been worn smooth. And when water flows over rocks, it not only causes a physical change, it can cause a change inside the rock to the different materials that make up the rock. This is called a chemical change. Let's see what water with a little vinegar, a weak acid from plants, can do to this soft rock called soapstone. After just a few minutes, you can begin to see particles in the water. Let's wait just a little longer. Now look, parts of this soft rock have dissolved. Why did some of the rock wash away here and some of it stay there? Water caused a chemical change. It was able to dissolve some of the material in the rock, while other parts did not dissolve. We saw how water can get into cracks in rocks, freeze, expand, and break rocks down. The same thing can happen with plants. Plants can grow in cracks in rocks. As the plant grows, the roots of the plant grow too, making the crack bigger and bigger until wind. This landform in Utah may have been smooth at one time. Desert winds carrying sand have weathered this surface. These workmen are getting ready to paint this truck. They're using this machine that blows air and sand to blast away the old paint. It's called a sandblaster. Look what sand and wind can do to a soft surface like wood in just a few minutes. Just like that sandblaster, over time, wind can weather away the surface of landforms, changing the way they look. Temperature. The wind isn't blowing on this rock in the sun, but this rock is still weathering. It's getting warmer now, and some of the materials in the rock are expanding quickly with the heat. Other materials in the same rock are expanding slowly. When the sun goes down, they'll contract or get smaller at different speeds too. This expansion and contraction is all smaller than we can see with our own eyes, but over time, it is enough to slowly break the rock down. So temperature changes can also cause weathering.
But after weathering breaks up rock, what happens to it?
So weathering is the process of rocks and Earth's crust slowly being broken down into smaller pieces. And weathering can and usually does take a very, very long time, many, many years, in order for weathering to take place. This is important for you to remember. I want you to highlight, star, circle, underline, whatever you need to do to understand what I'm about to say, and do this in your notes. If a rock is broken down by weathering but stays in one place, it is just called weathering. However, if that broken down piece of rock starts to move, that's when we call it erosion. And we'll learn more about erosion next mission. But it's very important for you to understand the difference between weathering and erosion. Please make sure you have that emphasized in your notes. And there are two types of weathering: physical weathering and chemical weathering. Physical weathering is when rocks are broken down into smaller pieces of the same kind of rock. There are 5 different agents or causes of physical weathering: water, ice, wind, temperature, plants, and animals. The video did a very good job of showing us those different causes of weathering. Let's first look at flowing water. Flowing water can carry with it particles of rock, soil, and sand. When that happens, they scrape along landforms and larger rock, causing those rocks and landforms to gradually become smaller and smaller and smaller over time. Ice, they did a very good job again in the video showing you, think about a water bottle that you put into the freezer overnight and what happens to that. Water can do the same thing into the cracks of rocks. It can seep into existing cracks of rocks. When the water freezes and becomes ice, the water takes up more space than it did when it first got in there. The ice then will make cracks in the rock deeper and bigger, causing it to weather, causing it to break apart. This process scientists call frost wedging. There you see some pictures in your notes and on the screen of how that works and what that looks like in the real world. Wind in large open areas like the desert, wind would blow sand against rocks. If it's happening very quickly at a fast rate and over the span of many years, that wind will break that rock down, and the rock will then also begin to change its shape. Temperature also changes rock because it causes a rock's surface to get hotter and then expand. When the temperature drops, the surface contracts or gets smaller again. If this happens over and over and over again, it will weaken the surface of the rock, causing the rock to break apart very easily. Again, causing it to weather, break apart. Finally, we have plants and animals. This is the last physical example of physical weathering. Plants, like in the picture, or trees, can sprout in a crack that exists in a rock. As the plant and roots grow, this will cause that rock to split even more and more. Eventually, that rock will totally break apart and fall away from where it was prior to the plant growing in it. Animals may also burrow or dig in cracks, also causing it to break away from existing rock. That was physical weathering. This is chemical weathering. Chemical weathering causes rock to change into different materials and break down into smaller pieces. So it breaks it down into smaller pieces after changing it into different materials. There are 3 different causes of chemical weathering: carbonic acid, oxygen, and plants and animals. Carbonic acid, this is like acid rain. Rainwater mixes with carbon dioxide in the air to form a weak acid that we call carbonic acid. And that comes down in the form of acid rain. That new chemical, when it hits the rock, causes the rock to break down and then weather and become smaller than it was before. Sometimes carbonic acid reacts with limestones, creating caves. That's where caves come from, this carbonic acid, this chemical weathering. Oxygen, when combined with iron in the presence of water, is a process called oxidation. And oxidation is another cause of chemical weathering that results in rust. And rust, as we've learned, is a chemical change. It can't be reversed very easily. Plants and animals can also be chemical changes. There's actually an animal and plant that release a chemical from their body that causes the rock to break down. Lichens is what I'm talking about. They grow on rocks and produce weak acid that will chemically weather the rock and break it down into smaller pieces. That is the end of this mission. Let's go over a quick summary. Weathering is a very long process that breaks down Earth's rock and landforms. There are 2 types, physical and chemical weathering. Physical weathering occurs when rocks are broken down into smaller pieces of the same kind of rock, while chemical weathering occurs when rocks change into different materials and break down into smaller pieces. If you have any questions, please let me know, but make sure you have written down your answers to the questions that you filled out in your notes, and I will see you in mission 4.